righty. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I heard y'all were in the midst of a transition in your church with a new pastor coming in. And do I have a transition story for you? My name is Michele Schneider. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a transgender woman. Today, I will be talking to you about my transition story, and I will answer any questions you have at the end of my sermon. So feel free to take notes, and if you're not comfortable sharing your questions at the conclusion of my sermon, feel free to talk with me in the fellowship hall. Without further ado, before I tell you about my story, I want to talk about my transgender identity. Most people that are transgender are those that identify as a gender opposite of the one they were assigned at birth or born as. For example, I am a transgender woman because I identify as a woman, though I was born a man. I was born a boy. Many transgender people use a name that is different than the one they were given when they were born. Their old name, the one they don't use anymore, that's called a dead name. Dead naming, which is when a trans person's old name is used instead of their new name, can be harmful and hard for trans people, myself included. If someone tells you to refer to them by a new name, it is important to respect that name and use it as often as possible. With that context, this is my transgender story. I was born on this day, 23 years ago, at Albany Medical Center, and I was named Michael. Michael is my dead name, meaning that it is a name I no longer use, as my name is now Michele. Growing up, my first memories of identifying with women was when I was in elementary school, where I would admire or relate more to women characters in movies and television. Among them was the weather woman on the news and a character in an Austin Powers movie, specifically Beyonce. At that time, I never really gave much thought to it. When living with my father, I was raised as a Catholic, which included going through Sunday school and becoming an altar server. At that time, I was more focused on doing the best I could at everything I did and trying not to disappoint anyone I looked up to. In many ways, I was living my life for others and not for myself. While there were many wonderful things within that church, part of being in that community involved messaging that I felt uncomfortable with, which included how gays go to hell and how they deserve disrespect from us. I didn't understand why we couldn't just be kind to everyone and why it was our place to pass such judgments like that. After being pressured into almost becoming a priest when I was 13 in a vain attempt to save our church, I stopped being an altar server, and my church was closed the following year by the Archdiocese. In order to save the church, they wanted me to become a priest to keep the doors open. But I wasn't comfortable being a participant in God's love on earth if it was exclusive and discriminatory. It wasn't long after this when I started to realize I was romantically attracted to men. For context, at this time, I was still Michael. I was still a man, attracted to men. Being a young kid at that time, and after being influenced by my church and many people I was around, which included some family members, I believed that my queerness was an abomination and a secret I had to hold on to for as long as possible. I tried to bargain with myself about it, as I thought I had crushes on some women in my life, but looking back, I really only admired them, and I wanted to be more like them. It was also around this time that I started drawing and doodling on everything. I mostly illustrated glamorous women based on photos I had seen and the characters I'd admired for years. I remember being proud to have learned how to draw hair well. Soon, I was drawing fairly realistic portraits of stars like Audrey Hepburn, Farrah Fawcett, and Mary Tyler Moore, among many others. While I was enamored with their aesthetics, I had developed an understanding that it was definitively different than the way I felt about men. Through my adolescence, I increasingly wanted to live more authentically. I felt like I was lying to myself and to everyone around me, and I was seeking an inner peace I hadn't had since I realized I was gay. So, I started to come out and tell friends I was gay as I was graduating high school. While this helped me greatly, especially with the support of some family and many friends, I still didn't feel the inner peace I thought I'd have. That anxiety was still there. During my second semester of college, I began to question my identity as a gay man. I started to draw less, and I began to learn how to use makeup and how to feel more confident in wearing it out and about. I also started collecting vintage clothing and jewelry and started doing photo shoots. I started to become the subject of my art instead of just the artist. What I had begun to experience is what I now know to be gender euphoria, which is the happiness I felt when presenting as I wanted with respect to gender. The opposite of this is gender dysphoria, of which I was also experiencing. This is negative feelings towards things that aren't in alignment with your identity. And for me, it was because I hated my facial hair and other masculine characteristics I had at that time. At that time, I was thinking that I could be a transgender woman, but I thought it would be much harder to be one, and I didn't want to become one if I couldn't look as amazing as the glamorous women I had admired all those years. I used to be quite insecure and vain. So I didn't give it much thought, and it was on the back burner of my mind for like the next year or so. When the pandemic started and the world shut down, I suddenly had a lot of time to think about life and what I wanted out of it. Up until this point, I kept myself busy in clubs, in jobs, and in my academics. After having thought more about being transgender over the next 9 months and doing research and reading about the experiences of other trans women, I realized that I was a trans woman and how badly I wanted to be unequivocally seen as a woman. I couldn't keep it a secret for too long, and I needed to come out. Part of this was fueled by a perceived race against time, as I feared the further masculinizing effects that testosterone would have on my 20-year-old body. I returned to college in the spring of 2021, and I started to identify with all pronouns as a way to sort of soft launch or set the stage for me to come out when I could. Wanting to tell my father first, while also being a difficult time in our family as my grandmother was dying, I chose to wait to come out until August 20th of that year, the day before I returned to campus for the fall semester. I was lucky to have not experienced fear like others may have in the face of such a transition. I was more excited to be more myself, and I felt ready for the change and newness, while ready to face the uncertainties with a smile. In a similar fashion, I encourage you to face the present changes within this church with the excitement for the future and the opportunities that come with it in the way that I did when becoming Michele. Once I came out, I took immediate action to help myself live more authentically to what I wanted. I made an appointment with the Gender Wellness Center to begin gender-affirming healthcare. I changed my name on campus, and I participated in advocacy work while learning more about myself. Finding community and safe spaces was a huge part of my self-acceptance and in helping me feel safe enough to live authentically. I started wearing heels and growing my hair out, and I soon taught myself how to use rollers so I can get that old Hollywood glamour look I had always admired. Still today, after almost living as Michele for 2 years, I sometimes find myself pleasantly shocked to see the woman looking back to me in any reflection I walk by. Over time, I've become more confident, secure, and happier. I have also found more internal peace, knowing that I have found identities I no longer question and no longer have to be anxious about when engaging with the world. After having transitioned, there is so much I have learned about the world, particularly in the differences between living as a man and as a woman. For example, I don't feel anxious walking alone at night, like many women do. However, I now understand why it can take so long to get ready in the morning and how it's almost an unset expectation to be put together. I mean, come on. I want to sleep in. It is especially interesting in regards to the privileges I have. While I am transgender, I am also white. I am cisgender passing, which means that I look like I was born female. And I'm pretty. These 3 forms of privilege have protected me from much of the hate and vitriol my friends have experienced, and my father has feared I will experience too. You may have heard privilege as a word used when talking about people that have lots of money or status. And while this is a form of privilege, so is being spared from negative experiences others face because of your identities and appearance. For example, it is a privilege to not have to change your full legal name in order to feel safer when engaging with the world around you, like I had to. It is also a privilege to be spared from the harmful and painful rhetoric of family members, which included being intentionally dead-named, like I had to handle. Being aware of your privileges and how you can use them to listen to and uplift the voices of marginalized communities, like LGBTQ people and people of color, makes a huge difference. Giving me the honor of speaking with you today is making a difference. From my experiences, there are a few points I would like to end on that you may find helpful for interacting with and supporting LGBTQ people. The first being to stay informed. Knowledge is power, and you have the power to make a difference. You can answer questions by asking a friend, looking them up online, or visiting local resources for more information. Speaking of making a difference, showing up and showing out is making a difference. Being present and support is a huge part of allyship. You can attend Pride events or share information on social media. While being present, be sure to listen to LGBTQ people and their experiences with an open mind and an open heart. While keeping your mind open, remember to remain respectful of others, even when you disagree. We are influenced by the people around us, our environment, and the media we consume. Keep in mind the influence you want to have on others. Not only is being present important, but so is being a role model for kindness and inclusion. If you're comfortable, call out disrespectful or mean things people say about others, especially about LGBTQ people. Words can be hurtful, and you have the power to make change. With that, also be honest with yourself and your LGBTQ loved ones. Change can be difficult to work through. My father still has a hard time using my name instead of the one he gave me when I was born, but he is honest with me, and I know how hard it is for him to break that habit. He expresses to me how he worries that he may put me in danger by calling me the wrong name in public, and how he wants me to be happy. He is also always telling me how proud he is of me. Be sure to express to your loved ones how much you care and how hard you try. And lastly, and what I find to be most important, do the best you can. We all make mistakes, and you deserve self-compassion and the opportunity to learn from them. Thank you. What questions do we have? I'd like to remind you that we also, I'll be hanging around afterwards if you'd like to talk then as well, if you're not comfortable now. All right.
Does anyone have any questions for Michele?
What was your reaction when asked to speak at a church, considering your experience with church? How did you feel about coming here today to share your story?
I remember being on the phone with you and you urging me to make sure I take time to think about it, but mine was an immediate yes. I've done this sort of, not really speaking to a crowd in this manner, but I have presented in classrooms before on queer and LGBTQ topics and education and advocacy, so absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
I have no questions, but I just want to say again, like I said this morning, you are so beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Alrighty. Well, thank you again for your attention and your attentiveness. And if you have any questions or you just want to chat afterwards, I'll be hanging out over there in the fellowship hall. Thank you.